program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
If you are planning to speak tonight, there are yellow slips of paper on the back counter. Please fill one out and hand it to Ryan at the front before you speak. Please start speaking by giving us your name and your address. Since we do have a full agenda tonight and we do have quite a few people in attendance, if you do come up to speak, make sure your remarks are fresh and not a repeat of what the person before you has said. Make sure you turn off your cell phones or put them on silent, please. The first item on our agenda is for a public hearing for recommendation C2P to R3P 4325 Jeffers Road, a 30-unit apartment building.
This is the property. It's on the south side of the North Crossing, east of Jeffers Road. The home builders have their office here. There is R4P zoning to the south, vacant land to the east. There's an aerial of the site. That's the home builder's office. This is the large apartment building to the south. Vacant land to the east. Highway. That's the site plan for the project. It shows access off the existing private drive. It's a 30-unit apartment building. Parking underneath the structure and with detached garages on both sides and some surface parking. This is building elevations. You can see the parking and the units, south side of the structure, floor plans. And there's a certified survey map also in the property showing this private drive, the existing home builder's office, and then the second lot for the property. And, the current zoning and development plan for the property allows that existing home builder's office and provides then that private drive with private utilities as access and service to this east lot for a second office building. The proposed rezoning is to allow the 30-unit apartment building. The one concern we do have with this request is its access and utilities are from an existing private drive and private utilities. And the long-term maintenance of this drive and utilities will need to be established in an agreement between the two properties. We'd also note that the property to the south has part of that private drive by easement on it and may likely have to be part of that agreement. The issue will need to be addressed as part of final site plans, which should be reviewed by the Plan Commission. We've looked at this a little more closely in the last few days. We do believe the best way to address particularly the utilities is to examine the utilities either as built or by visual inspection and determine if they meet city standards. If they do meet city standards, we would recommend a utility easement be given to the city for this situation so that we know in 30 years there will be an entity around to go in and fix and repair those utilities. The private drive, we have many private drives within the community. They are taken care of typically by property owners and by agreement, but private utilities, there's not many that exist. And we've found that it's better for each city to be taking care of those. The comprehensive plan does designate the site as being appropriate for commercial development. There's a statement in the text about areas designated for commercial development that want to be considered for residential, and those criteria we placed in your report. Again, we note there is a large senior housing apartment to the south and hillside to the east. Traffic, utility, drainage, and other city services are reviewed in the city engineer's report. The project has 13 one-bedroom, 17 two-bedroom units. The required parking is provided with 23 attached garages, 8 detached garages, 16 surface parking stalls. The site layout provides room for landscaping and other site improvements. The length of the building now places this east end of the building more than 400 feet away from the hydrant on the end of this cul-de-sac. And fire department is recommending that a yard hydrant be added to this site, probably up in this area. So they have coverage for the detached building and vehicles on the east end of the building. They also would like to review driveway widths. Address signs will also be required for this situation. These changes and other plan details would require Plan Commission review with final site plans, and the building elevation we did include in your packet. We attached the city engineer's report. If the Plan Commission finds compliance with those provisions we noted in the comprehensive plan, we would recommend the following conditions. Number one, final site plans requiring Plan Commission review and addressing the issues noted in the report. Number two, we'd modify that condition. An agreement for the long-term maintenance of the private drive and private utilities will be filed with the final site plan for Plan Commission review. And then adding a city utility easement will be provided for the existing utilities if they meet city standards. And number three then is compliance with the recommendations in the city engineer's report, which is drainage calculations. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Daryl? Commissioner Mitchell.
And what happens if the utilities don't meet city standards after you inspect them?
Then there would be a private utility easement required for this situation, and it would address a number of issues such as regular maintenance, flushing of the hydrants, things such as that. It'd be worked out between city engineer and city attorney staff with the applicant, and then be brought to the Plan Commission as part of the final site plans.
Are there any other questions for Daryl?
I
Commissioner
have
Mitchell,
one
go
more.
on.
So we have a letter here that says that the home builders would maintain the private road indefinitely. Is that enough as far as the road goes?
No, the easement that is in place actually has a 3-year expiration in it, and then it simply reverts to abutting properties. So that existing easement would need to be strengthened. A private drive easement between 3 property owners should spell out who's responsible for snow removal, who's responsible if it needs to be repaired, things such as that. And it can be all 3 of the property owners if that's the situation, but it needs to clearly spell it out.
And so then if the home builders were to sell their building and move somewhere else, then that agreement would
Run with the land.
go with the
Yep.
building? Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Other than the requirement for the utilities to meet city standards, are there other conditions that aren't as obvious that they need to comply with in terms of granting us an easement to the city for maintenance on those?
Not that I'm aware of. If Dave's got any thoughts on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I have one.
Yes.
What is the width of the existing private drive that would be west of the cul-de-sac?
It appears, no, I'm guessing on that. Bob Johnson's here, and you should ask Bob that question. That's the
Okay.
applicant's architect.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any at this time. Is the applicant here?
Hello.
Please introduce yourself.
Jason Grippentruck on behalf of Haas Brothers. And I just got the answer from Bob. It's 24 feet wide.
Okay,
Where it connects to the cul-de-sac.
okay. I'll let you make your presentation, then I have a question
I don't
for
really
you.
have a presentation, so
Okay.
I'm open for questions.
So here's my question about the private drive. I'm familiar with that building, and I've gone to meetings there. Very often, if there are meetings on the first floor, people park and they line both sides of that private drive because there's not adequate parking down there if you get a larger number of people. There are also cars that back out of that parking lot onto the private drive itself. And that seems a little awkward for adding additional traffic.
I mean, I think that was a concern from the city too as well, and the Home Builders Association specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my site plan, my site would provide adequate parking for all tenants and guests.
Right.
I mean, we have plenty of room to add additional surface parking spaces as well, if need
Okay.
be.
I'm thinking about people getting in and out to the street and stuff because it can get very congested on that private drive in front of the Home Builders Association.
That I can't speak to because I'm not familiar with that situation.
Okay. Yes, Darrell.
Typically, on a 24-foot wide private drive, we'd see fire department having a recommendation on that final site plan that be signed as a fire lane, no parking allowed.
Okay.
And that might be what could happen in this situation. They do have perpendicular parking on a private drive, which is fine,
Okay.
but typically that narrow of a private drive gets labeled a fire lane and signed as such.
Okay, thanks. I think that answers my question.
Okay.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Klinkhammer?
Thank you. Are you aware of whether or not the utilities under that private drive meet city standards?
That I can't speak to. My next email or call was going to be to Pete and their company tomorrow to see if they could find as-built drawings from when
Okay.
it was originally installed.
Assuming that they would meet our standards, would you have issues with granting an easement for them? Okay.
It'd actually be my preference if the
Right.
city would actually assume those laterals.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Keep in mind, I can't always see your blue lights. I don't see any at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. If there's anyone who'd like to speak, they can come forward. Please hand your yellow piece of paper to Ryan and introduce yourself with your name and your address.
I'm Larry Shupler, 6722 10th Avenue, Eau Claire. We own the adjoining property at 4223. I guess, and I stopped down and talked to Darrell. When that driveway went in, I don't know if you can put that up. The property, our property goes down the middle of that driveway. We signed an agreement at that time to allow them to put the driveway in, and they would pay, the Builders Association would pay to bring the utilities across the street over to our property. That was our trade-off when the driveway was put in. At that time, the Planning Commission, City Council had some doubts whether a driveway should be that close to the north crossing because of the traffic buildup on Jeffers Road trying to get across the north crossing. Now, I'm not, like I told Darrell, I'm not here either way because we're trying to sell our property. But I thought I should come up and give you a background. That road really was contentious, or driveway, not road, when it was put in because of the traffic buildup. Well, since that went in, the traffic has built up tremendously on Jeffers Road getting up to the north crossing. So it's really up to you guys what you want to do. Like I say, my wife and I, we've got the property up for sale. We want to sell our property, but I think whoever, when you put that many apartments and that much traffic on top of what the Builders Association going in and out, it's going to be a beast to get out of there, simply because of the traffic on Jeffers that close to the north crossing. All right?
Before you go, let me see if there's any questions for you. Are there any questions for the speaker? I don't see any, but I have one. Do you own the property that's directly to the south then of that driveway?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, very good, thanks. I just wanted clarification. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move for approval with staff recommendations and the necessary agreements on caring for that private drive as well as a public easement on the utilities.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
So in other words, you move with Darrell's amendment? What Darrell, okay.
Is there any discussion? Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Solberg, minimum spacing for city from the north crossing will be 230 feet, and the drive is 250 feet away?
Correct.
Okay, so that meets the minimum spacing.
For the city standards. I know it's
Okay.
less than DOT would like to see, but city-wise, it's okay.
I know it's less than what DOT would like to see. And as far as the agreement for the utilities for the property, the south coming off of there, that's really between that property owner and the property owner of the home builders.
If the utilities end up being a public utility, then that would be a main, just like it would be going down a street, and then they would be allowed to hook up to that public main, like it would be, anything else. They would have it at their cost for their development, but it would be public utilities at that point, and the laterals would be the private part.
Okay, so that would answer hopefully your other concern with that.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, public hearing for recommendation, a rezoning amendment and a conditional use permit for a ground floor residence.
This property is located at where Water Street magically becomes Menominee Street. It still is Menominee Street to the south, and then at 10th Avenue. There's a mixture of zoning, commercial, multifamily, commercial, some older homes, Hobbs, and what may soon become Sonatag. And the aerial photo then showing the property with public right-of-way on all three sides. Dental, apartment, mixed-use building, small old homes, Hobbs, what may someday become Sonatag. That is actually north, 10th, Menominee, the magical curve, and then Menominee right away down here. Placement of a new building on the property with parking and access off of 10th. And building elevations. Let's leave that one up there. This is a new mixed-use building for the property. It involves a conditional use permit because of a ground floor dwelling unit. It's 2 stories with 2,955 square foot footprint. There's 5 one-bedroom dwelling units, of which one's on the ground floor, and that leaves 1,959 square foot of leasable commercial space also on the ground floor. The existing general development plan, which we attached in your packet, would use the existing building on the site as a restaurant bar. Parking would have been provided using the existing parking lot on Menominee Street right-of-way to the south. The agreement for the use of this right-of-way was not signed by the applicant. The conditional use permit for the bar in the building has expired. The landmarks designation of this property allowed the Landmarks Commission to delay the demolition of the building for 18 months. That time frame has expired, and under the provisions of the Landmarks Ordinance, the property owner may obtain demolition permits. We did attach a letter we received from the Landmarks Commission. In terms of the zoning, the C2P zoning for the property would remain, and it is consistent with our comprehensive plan. The site plan does show the proposed building at a 10-foot setback from Menominee Street right-of-way, which is presently that parking lot. Plans for this right-of-way with the Sonatag project would actually see it being developed as the main street access into that project, or at least one of them. The required setback for a building in a C2 district from a street is 20 feet. And a ground floor dwelling unit is also shown on this corner of the building within that setback. City code requires that actually to be 28 feet back from a public street. City code does allow Plan Commission and City Council to modify that setback under our plan development ordinance, but we do not believe it is appropriate for this situation. We do expect that new Menominee Street entrance on the existing right-of-way into Sonatag will have a lot of traffic, particularly when events are ending. And we do not believe it's appropriate location for reduced setbacks, especially a ground floor dwelling unit. The site plan does show the required parking for this planned use on site, and then its access is to 10th. And 10th will become a less used street once Sonatag gets developed. The primary reason for that, and I'll show it with this map, is this exit, if you're taking a left, is difficult to see traffic coming around the corner on Water Street. So Sonatag has been developing with the idea of getting the main entrance out here, so you have clear vision both right and left at an intersection here, not up here. Just so everybody understands why they're looking at moving that entrance over to here. The conditional use permit is to allow the ground floor dwelling unit. We actually do believe moving that ground floor dwelling unit from this side, which is next to Menominee, over to this side, which would be next to 10th, would be more appropriate. And then allowing that dwelling unit at the 20-foot setback instead of the required 28-foot setback should be considered, particularly given the situation that this property has public right-of-way on all three sides. So it's difficult for it to provide that 28-foot setback. And we can further discuss that concept with you if you so desire. We'd also note that applicant is requesting a 2-year time frame for the conditional use permit instead of the normal 1, which Plan Commission can allow. We are recommending approval of this amendment to the general development plan with conditions. The applicant shall modify this conditional use permit and provide a 20-foot setback here. That ground floor dwelling unit be flipped and placed over on this side of the building, but is allowed at a 20-foot setback. Plan Commission approval of final site plans consistent with the revised general development plan. We would add a 4th condition for Plan Commission to consider on allowing the conditional use permit for that 2-year time frame. Oh, it is in there. Sorry, missed it. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Daryl? Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Thank you. If Menominee Street on the south side of that property becomes goes back to being a street, is there sufficient parking on the property for the building that's proposed?
Yes. This is its required parking for that building, yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Who was first? Commissioner Mitchell.
The required parking for this building would be 5 stalls, wouldn't it?
It'd be 5 stalls for the dwelling units and then 1 stall per 250 square feet for the commercial space.
Commercial, okay.
Commissioner Larson.
Thank you. The agreement for use of the right-of-way, that was, pardon me, that was part of the proposal that came before the Plan Commission in, I think, August of 16, is that right? To
Yes.
make it into a tavern
Yes,
restaurant. Was the agreement drafted
yes,
right close to that time?
yes.
Did you have any explanation why they didn't sign the agreement?
There was a provision in the agreement that stated applicant would not demolish the property. And my understanding, you should ask the applicant, is they wanted to see if they could get the business successfully operating before they signed such an agreement, and they weren't able to, so they're now coming back saying we'd rather demolish the building, which is allowed under the Landmarks Commission provisions, and we'll put our parking on our own site instead.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Thank you. I know that the Sonatag development is not very far along yet, but have there, do we know what that's, if they move the access to Menominee Street to the west side of this property, what that's going to look like?
We've seen preliminary plans. Basically, has a roadway, this little corner here, that's owned by Sonatag, so they'd actually bring in a street into here. So we basically have seen. And then run this down in this, the main access into on this side of the building. But beyond that, again, the idea of getting this roadway over here is now folks can make a left turn and actually see the traffic looking back this direction. For folks sitting here and trying to make a left turn, there's very little distance here for them to see traffic coming around the corner. And that's the whole idea of moving it.
Or would that part of 10th Avenue then be excess property? Would that?
That hasn't been determined. There is a curb cut for this business. There's maybe some curb cuts for these residents. They are proposing their driveway to 10th. So there may be a need for a more minor street in that location to accommodate those folks, or maybe something could be done in terms of making it less of a thoroughfare, or maybe it's desired to let right turns out here. You know, that hasn't been determined yet.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Peterson.
There was an allusion to some of the excess right-of-way or some of the parcels being sold at a deep discount back in 1999. Were all the agreements that were agreed to back in 1999 performed by both parties? I know they got it listed on the National Register.
I do know the agreement required it to be landmarked. It was landmarked. Beyond that, I've not spent a considerable amount of time reading through the agreement.
Okay, from what I read in it, I'm not a lawyer, but it looks like they did what they agreed to do back then, and
Yes, that's my
water
understanding.
over the dam, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Mitchell.
Regarding having a dwelling unit on the first floor under this zoning, what sort of criteria do we look at for that? Why is that not just
conditional use?
allowed? Why is it a conditional use?
It's primarily pertains to the idea in a commercial district, you want on the front of it, you're building a commercial use. And that if you're going to have dwelling units, they should be second floor or to the back of the building. In this situation, it's unique in that, well, where's the front and back of the building, given the fact that the whole property surrounded by right-of-way. That's why, in our opinion, the better side of the building for the dwelling unit would be the 10th Avenue, given what's happening with Sonatag to the south. It definitely wouldn't be the curb. That, in my mind, is the front of the building. So that's the reason it's in there. To build new dwelling units in a C2 or essential business district, or if it was just zoned residential, it'd be only a 20-foot setback. So the idea is to try to get a commercial use in front of the building, not to prohibit that you have dwelling units on the ground floor.
Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Just full of questions tonight. If the residential component was moved to the 10th Avenue side, then that setback that's on the opposite end of the building, it still needs a variance, but it would be acceptable on a commercial property?
Again, what we're recommending is you maintain 20-foot setbacks. So this building's going to get 10 foot skinnier with this recommendation. And just have the dwelling unit over here. It won't be at a 28-foot setback. It'll only be at 20. In our mind, that's acceptable simply because we would view this more as the back of the building. You know, have the building to the dwelling unit to the back of the building. My guess is Bob, their architect, he'll probably actually increase the building slightly out this way as a way of accommodating that loss of square footage here. That's my guess. That's up to them to decide how they want to do that. But
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I have one final one. If they did make that change and got that setback on the Menominee side set, they would need to come back before us again with the final site plan
Yes.
then? Okay.
yes, this is all subject to they come back to you with the final site plan. Yeah.
Very good. Commissioner Mitchell.
So the amendment to the general development plan is the fact that it's no longer a tavern, it's now a residence.
And the amendment is it's not the existing building, it's a new building.
New building, yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions before we turn Daryl loose? I think you're free for the moment. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak?
I'm Bob Johnson, the architect for the project. I guess I didn't realize, or we didn't realize, that Menominee Street was going to go on the south side of this. We thought it was just going to be a parking lot. So we're willing to make the changes that Daryl's recommending. We'll get that 20-foot setback on the Menominee Street and put the apartment building on the 10th Avenue side. So we'll make those changes and come back to the Planning Commission.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Larson.
Thank you. So what happened?
You guys have any other questions for Bob at all?
So what happened about the Menominee Street thing?
Yeah, I mean, what happened with the tavern and the
I was sick for
restaurant?
about a month, and I didn't get a chance to talk to the city. And James, I guess, didn't ask that question or whatever.
No, I'm talking about the bar and the restaurant. What happened?
He can answer that one.
Well, what happened is basically you asked a question earlier about the parking agreement. And ultimately, I couldn't sign that agreement because I had to do my due diligence to find out if this was a financially feasible project. And unfortunately, 4 years into it with a lot of evidence, it wasn't. And that's why I did not sign that parking agreement, because I needed to do that. And, I can stand in front of you and say I put everything into it to try to make this work. And unfortunately, there's just some powers that be that didn't really want to help that project along. And so at some point, I've got to cut ties and say, hey, financially, I have to do what's best because this is how I make my living. And so that's where we're at.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Brenholt.
Why the need for the 2-year conditional use instead of the normal 1 year?
Well, after 4 years of doing this, especially the way building is right now, as much as I've got a lot of time and energy and I want to turn this project, I just know getting quotes out there and getting builders in there and stuff like that is not a quick process. So I just want to make sure that I give myself enough cushion to be able to do that properly.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Is the existing structure sound, even though it may not be conducive to making a bar or a restaurant out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I have I've never said that it's not a sound structure.
Okay. We just haven't found the right use for it yet.
I don't know if I would go as far as say that we haven't found the right use. I've put 4 years into trying to find ultimate uses for it, and I've even stepped outside the box and said, hey, I'll donate this property to you, just find a lot for it. And I stand in front of you and say the same thing.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. Well, given the landmark status of the building and all, did you consider putting something like this in that building?
Yes, I did, and my family has went down that avenue, and it's not feasible to do that, conducive to do that.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? I will ask one. It makes me very sad to lose this building. Would you consider perhaps donating it to the museum if there was a way for it to be saved and moved off to that site? And I know we had this discussion a couple of years ago, too.
Just as I just said, I'd be more than willing to donate the building, with the exceptions that I will not move it. I will not hold up my plans any longer. Ultimately, like I said, I've given 4 years, and no one's approached me with any options. And I've asked that question probably half a dozen times. So, if you guys can conducively work with me to find a way to do that, of course I would.
Okay. You haven't had any actual discussions like with the museum or anything?
Yes, I have had discussions with the museum.
Okay, they just didn't go anywhere?
I was told that we're not interested in that.
Okay, very good. That answers my question. Are there any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any at this point. We may call you back if something else comes up, okay?
Sounds good, thank you.
This is a public hearing, if you'd like to speak.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Learman of 719 4th Avenue. I am the president of the Historic Randall Park Neighborhood Association. Tonight, I am representing my constituents in our opposition of this proposed plan, many of whom are unable to attend this evening. I'm going to keep my comments thorough and as brief as possible. When I moved into the historic Randall Park neighborhood just over 2 years ago, I was appalled by the caustic attitude towards its historic buildings. I watched as developers tore their neglected properties down, requesting variances for buildings that were newer, bigger, and in their opinion, better. As residents in the neighborhood and as a neighborhood association, these changes are unacceptable. We've been outspoken about our opposition to this through both our words and actions since well before my time in the neighborhood. I was flabbergasted when I learned that I would be speaking to you about this property. I had hoped that the solutions that appeared to be finalized on September 27, 2016, with the granting of a liquor license, were the final intentions for the property. As an association, we have made recommendations and our own moral accommodations to allow for the Kaiser Building to become a gastropub because we felt and still feel that saving the Kaiser Building was priority number one. The Kaiser Building is more than just a mere physical facility. It is the first site to the Water Street corridor, and it is the last log that remains to witness Eau Claire's lumber era. I would be remiss if I did not point out that this building is also part of the National Historic Register. When consulted on the gastropub idea, we were reassured that the building would be lovingly restored as part of the process. This time around, there was no communication between the neighborhood and those involved in the redevelopment project. Without this communication, we are facing a lack of confidence that the developer will respect our wishes, design or otherwise. Our major concern beyond the demolition of the building itself is the message that will be sent should the zoning change and setback variance be granted, that historical features can be bulldozed at will and replaced with whatever suits the developer. If we do this for a single property, what is to stop it from becoming multiple? While we see beautiful restoration work in downtown growing side by side with new development, on this side of the river, it seems that our only option is to mindlessly replace the past, to tear down beautiful landmarks, and to prop up buildings that utterly disregard the history, the culture, and the aesthetics of their surrounding. To be quite frank, it is incredibly disheartening to see this building sit vacant while businesses wish to utilize it. While discussing this property, I had a great conversation with the owner of Offbeats Violin and Guitars, who told me that this building was their first choice to run their business in. I am certain that with this beautiful building, they were not the only people who were interested. It seems like faulty logic to cram a new building into a small space in the hopes of attracting tenants who already wish to use the property as is. There is a large difference between being unable to utilize a building to its fullest potential and purposefully refusing to do so. It is unfortunate that such a historic building could have its fate decided by so few people, all while an entire community wished to see it saved. With these views neglected up to this point, it's been made very clear that the parties involved in this development have become tone deaf to the needs of the neighborhood and our community. It is a dangerous precedent to set. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Hello. John Mann, 1107 Graham Avenue. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my comments. You have in your packets a letter that I've submitted in my capacity as chairperson of the Eau Claire Landmarks Commission. And it details how after the building permit was submitted in 2015, the commission worked to come up with a successful plan to save the building. Needless to say, we were disappointed to hear the news that that plan had been pulled back and a new plan for a demolition had been put forward. I'm glad the 1999 agreement came forward because it seems to me that while the request for a building permit may be within the letter of that agreement and within the letter of the law, it's a pretty clear violation of the spirit of the agreement, to my mind, wherein the city bent over backwards to provide discounted property in return for the preservation of the building, in this case through local designation, and now it seems that the applicant is willing to disregard that agreement altogether. So Landmarks Commission is disappointed at this news and would like to see the Planning Commission not make amendments to the general development plan that supports the demolition of this building.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Mitchell?
So there's more than one of us dismayed that this has come back again. Did you, and I seem to recall that you looked at the possibility of moving it. How did that work out?
There wasn't a lot of interest in the possibility of moving. We also discussed the possibility of sale. That really didn't go anywhere. But ultimately, the plan that came together I thought was a good one. And staff for the city, members of the Landmark Commission spent a good deal of time and effort trying to move that plan forward. And it was really sort of caught off guard by the abandonment of that plan and the submission of subsequent demolition permit.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Can it be moved?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on building moving, but what I would say though is that were it to be moved, it might, not necessarily guaranteed, lose its designation because one of the criterion for listing on the national or local registers that a building maintain its integrity, which includes integrity of setting, right? So if you move a historic building, if a building has been moved, it often can't be listed. Likewise, if a building that's listed is moved, it sometimes loses that designation.
Are there any other comments? Commissioner Klinkhammer?
I have a question for Mr. Tufte, if
Okay.
I could.
Thanks for your
there
time.
may be other questions for Mr. Mann.
Yeah, you might want to stay up here. Okay, for a second.
Does the owner of this property, because of the 18-month having been elapsed, does he have the right to demolish this building or move it off, regardless of what the decision is with this proposal?
Yes.
Any other questions for Dr. Mann? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Hi, my name is Lydia Borboom. I live at 534 Water Street, just down the street from this place. I'm a student at UWEC, and like I said, I live on Water Street. And somebody earlier said that this is kind of the first building you see when you're driving this way into the historic, beautiful Water Street area, and I have to agree with that. As a student, we see a lot of new buildings coming up to house all of us that are coming to the university, which is awesome. There's always a big need for student housing, but at the same time, I think that it's important to maintain old historic places like this so that we can keep that feeling of downtown Eau Claire and the feeling of the old logging industry and stuff there, so that we know Eau Claire's past and our history and stuff like that. On top of that, it's to my understanding that this decision to demolish the building was not run by any neighborhood associations or any community members that would be affected by this, and I think that that's kind of the backbone of democracy, right, is to get everyone's opinion of these things, and I think that that's a little disrespectful not to make sure that we all have our voices heard in something like this, and so I really have to advocate for the staying of this building, for students, for people who are coming to Eau Claire, and for just the purpose of the building staying as it is and the importance of it. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak, and I would take any questions.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue?
My name is Sharon Hildebrandt. I live at 426 Summit Avenue. I'll try not to repeat the things that have been said. But I was present, and I can give you a little bit of a different history on both the 1998 action, which landmarked the building and gave significant breaks to the owner to relocate their business to Menominee Street, give them high visibility from their former, actually Water Street, that intersection that Darrell was talking about. Moving that from where it was behind Hobbs, moving their business into a very highly visible location. And if you've read the packet information, you know that the price per square foot was very attractive. And the city, my taxes, also paid for utilities that were redirected to the site or changed for the site. So there's been, as has been mentioned, a fair amount of city involvement, tax dollars designated to this. And in exchange for that was the landmark status to preserve this building and hopefully to find the right use for it. That clearly has not happened. But I urge you not to allow this building to be destroyed because of the actions or inactions to make this a viable business property where it is and in the building that exists. It is local National Register. It is the last known structure in Eau Claire, tying us to 70 or 80 years of lumbering history. It sits at that very prime location. The Sontag development is still unknown, but the street access, both from, is that 10th through 11th, I'm not sure, and Menominee Street, is still up for discussion, could change. May or may not be there when Sontag is finished. This building could impact that, or the destruction of the building and the new development could impact that. In the 2016 agreement, the offer was made to assist with marketing it for reuse or for selling it. To my knowledge, none of that was pursued by the owner. Generous offers, again, by city staff and people in the community to assist with finding, if not a redevelopment by the owner, then a sale, possible sale. That, I believe, was not at all pursued. I believe that the asking price was increased significantly when people in the community did express interest in buying it. The best use of this building is not the landfill. The best use of this site, I don't think, is this development, given the unknowns that are going to happen down there. I think the best use of this building is to find the right owner or use for it, where it sits, in this location. I, too, have a lack of confidence that these new plans will go any better than previous plans. And I don't think a 2-year allowance is going to get you any further than a 1-year, given to most developers. So I ask and encourage you not to approve changes to this site for this development, and to please try to do everything you can to save the Kaiser Lumber Building. Thank you.
Before you go, let's see if there's any questions for you. Are there any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? As the applicant, you can come forward.
So I feel, I guess, a diligence to answer some of the questions that were presented here. First one being, I want to clarify the transaction that my grandparents signed, or entered into, I should say, with the city and the purchase of the land. For clarity, the 1004 property, the reason that my grandparents purchased that property is to relocate their business. Ultimately, from some of the individuals you have heard from, they weren't able to do that with the property that they purchased. And my grandfather's ultimate plan was to put the building that he wanted to for his business, because his business had grown, which our family has been on this block for since roughly 1989. Therefore, he did, and my grandmother, they did execute everything that was requested of them in that agreement. In exchange, there were 4 lots that were purchased, which you have the information on. 2 of those lots, which were on the 1004 property, were sold because they basically were deemed unusable lots. So they were sold at a discount, so that is correct. I believe at $1 a square foot, because ultimately the city wanted those on someone's tax roll. Then for clarification, where, number one, it's not my business. So that is my uncle that owns that business. Where the Riverside Bike and Skate sits right now, my family had purchased that land at market value, what the city had paid for it, which there's a precedent with that with the city. So financially, I would have to disagree and say that our family was not given any discounts. As far as clarification for the Randall neighborhood, the reason that I did not go back to them after I'd asked for assistance was because I was told that I could not get help from them, which I did notify them and ask with cooperation regarding a reference letter to the city on my interactions with them over 2 years to try to preserve the building, which I did receive notification that they could not back me in that situation. So they were notified. And ultimately, I think the last piece is that I have worked with individual private people to purchase the building. Ultimately, we couldn't come to agreement on that because they ran into a lot of the same things that I have over the last 4 years. So per se, because I didn't put a for sale sign doesn't mean that the property wasn't tried to be sold.
Very good. Are there any questions for the applicant? Yeah, sorry,
It's okay.
the glass
right.
blocks it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Larson.
Thank you. So when your parents, or your grandparents, I should say, initially bought this property and signed the agreement, I think it was 1999, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that was
Okay.
the time on. I'm not, apologies.
So their intention from that time was to tear the building down and replace it with a new building?
Yeah, I mean, my grandparents, they bought that property to relocate their business.
It doesn't make much sense to me because they agreed to make it a historic landmark.
Well, they didn't agree to that until all the public outcry.
So they never intended on preserving the property from the beginning. Is that what
Correct.
you're saying?
Correct. And just since you asked that question, I mean, ultimately, that agreement, legally, there's no bearing to me. I purchased the property from my grandmother. That doesn't transfer on to me. So, I mean, ultimately, I don't, as a candidate, as a property owner, I mean, I can't dictate what my grandparents did, and there was another transaction, and that doesn't carry to me. So, I don't know how that's relevant to this at this point.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Wait.
Oh, Commissioner Peterson.
In that the building now has no value to you, you're willing to tear it down. When you were approached by people possibly buying the property, did you discount the value of the building and just do the land with them?
I went off of the fair market appraisal, which I had done to use as the value of the property and the building.
Okay, but now the building is nothing to you in that you're willing to tear it down.
I think I previously mentioned I'm willing to donate the building.
But would you be willing to sell the property as just the cost of the property without the cost of the building included?
No, I'm not willing to sell the property. I have plans that I presented in front of you today.
Okay.
Any other questions? I don't see any at this time. Thank you. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak.
Good evening. My name is, my name is Helene Smyer. I live at 320 Broadway Street in the Randall Park neighborhood. And I'm only coming up here because of something that the applicant just stated. I was president when that took place in 2016. And the follow-up request of the applicant was for the neighborhood to write a character reference letter as he applied for his, the liquor license. And I said, the neighborhood doesn't do character references. I had no knowledge of his life before we met him. He came to one meeting. We didn't work with him for 2 years. And I had a lot of confidence, we all expressed a lot of confidence in him that this plan would work. And it was a fine line, as was said before, because we have issues with alcoholism in our neighborhood, and so we sort of bent that little rule and prioritized the building. But to say that we did not support him further is not accurate. I guess the way I see it, I've thought about this, we really did have confidence in James, that he was going to make this work. He seemed sincere, he really wanted to do this, but he obviously didn't have the confidence in the neighborhood, because when I said we couldn't do a character reference, he stopped communicating. We had no idea he was having trouble with his plan. I mean, since then, we have, as you know, established a revitalization corporation. Now, we're not established yet, but I think had he come back to the neighborhood, we probably would have tried to find some other avenue. I mean, we don't have finances yet, but we have made many networking system, and perhaps we could have, I don't know if we could have ever met its price, because it's quite high. But I think the sincerity, and when he just said that he really thought his grandfather didn't enter into that agreement in good faith, honestly, to keep that as a landmark building, I think that's part of the problem right there. I think in good faith, my understanding of landmark properties are, you agree you're going to preserve that. We have them all over the neighborhood. Nobody else is tearing their homes down with landmark signs. I thought that was a condition of the getting a landmark status. So it's troubling to me that this building can be lost simply either because of hard feelings, miscommunication, not enough political will for the city, for whatever entities need to come together to save this building. It's just troubling and unfortunate. And I don't think this is really your avenue of what you have to decide. I think you work with zoning and things, but I would also agree with Mr. Mann that you not just allow this, approve these plans, because then you're approving the tearing down of the building. And the only other thing I really would like to know is you talk about the future of development. I've seen some of those proposed buildings for the Sonnentag. They're beautiful. I mean, they're really upscale and marvelous. This building doesn't seem to fit. I don't know if that's part of how you deal with planning for the future, but I don't see it as really fitting aesthetically to what might be there in the future. However, a historic building always fits. That's
Very
it.
good. Are there any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, but we should try to wrap it up, I think. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
Madam President, or
Yes.
Chairman, or whatever you are.
Yes, Commissioner Mitchell.
I would request that we divide the question, and I would move approval of the general development plan only.
We have a suggestion
I
on
will
the floor.
second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So the first part of the amendment would be specifically,
The first motion is on the general development plan. And may I speak to that, please?
okay,
I'm going to vote no on this part of it. I am, because of the history of the last project, I'm skeptical about this project. And I'm afraid that we're going to find a historic building torn down for green space forever. And I can't put my approval on this, so I will be voting no.
any further discussion? Commissioner Klinkhammer.
I will vote no on this as well. It seems to me that there's so much fluidity with the development that's going to occur on Menominee Street, that to do something now without knowing what that's going to look like is inopportune. I find it somewhat disheartening that during that 18-month period, that I think that trying to find a use for this building was just given lip service. I don't think that there was any real effort. I think the site and the building is important enough to our culture and our community that an effort should be made to preserve that and use it. And there are people in this community that would buy it and use it. When these parcels, these 4 parcels were sold, if I read this correctly, the 2 parcels on the east side of 10th Avenue sold for $250 a square foot on the condition that they buy the 2 parcels that this building sits on for $1 for each parcel, not $1 a foot. It was $1 for each parcel with the condition that it be a landmark home or building. So there are too many reasons not to approve this.
Is there any other discussion, Commissioner Larson?
I'm going to vote no as well, for the reasons that Commissioner Klinkhammer said and Commissioner Mitchell, but also because I get the feeling that this agreement was never entered into in good faith from the very beginning. I think it's not true that they didn't get a discount on these parcels. They clearly did. In exchange for that, it would be a historic landmark. You make things a historic landmark in order to preserve them. But we were told tonight that that was never the intention from the very beginning. And I don't believe that there isn't a good higher use for this building as it stands. I think it's a perfect spot for a gastropub. There's going to be a several thousand seat event center just down the block. And I can't believe that the money that it would cost to build this, tear down that building and build this, is any less than it would be to make that into a viable gastropub. So I just feel like I don't have any confidence that this will work any better than what's there.
Are there any other remarks? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I just have to agree with most of what I've heard tonight, and this building can be legally torn down, I guess, and we can't stop that, but I can't put my name on it, and I won't.
Is there anyone else? Commissioner Radabel.
I'll get my 2 cents in too. I always err on the side of development and progress, but there is a difference between a landmark building and an old building. And I think it's pretty clear this one's got some significance, so I'm with everybody else here.
Anybody else? Well, then I'll put my 2 cents worth in. I kind of have a long history with this building, all the way back to the 1999 agreement, and I think it's really awful if we ever thought about losing it. So I too will be voting this down because I think we need to work harder to try and find a way to preserve this building as it sits right now. Any other commentary? Then let's call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Aye. The motion is defeated. Okay, now what are you going to do with the second part of your motion?
I'm going to ask Daryl, do we have to do anything now with the conditional use?
No, it's a moot point, no.
Okay. All right, we will go on to the third part of our agenda, which is a public hearing for recommendation for the site plan for Haymarket Plaza.
Good evening. The city has prepared a site plan for a park and open space area called Haymarket Plaza that's located at the confluence of the Eau Claire River and the Chippewa River. This is the site located right here with the Eau Claire River and the Chippewa River. The property is owned public and it's about 1 acre in size. The site is also abuts the Haymarket Landing Building, the mixed-use building located here to the east, and then the future Confluence Arts Center that's located right here to the south. In addition, as part of the site plan, as you'll see tonight, there's a proposed pedestrian bridge that would connect from this site across the Eau Claire River over to the Phoenix Park site in about this location right here. The parcel was previously used as a parking lot and a small park area up until about 2012. At that time, plans were approved by the Plan Commission and by the City Council to convert this area into a park in conjunction with the construction of the Haymarket Landing and then with the Arts Center located here. This is a aerial of the area that was taken about 2 weeks ago. This is the Arts Center that's under construction located here. Haymarket Landing mixed-use building. This is the Chippewa River heading south. The Eau Claire River would be going around the bend here off to your left here, and this is the site that we're talking about right here. Dave Solberg from the engineering department that's here tonight has had numerous public meetings over the last 2 to 3 years, including some design charrettes to come up with this design and working with the consultant. And then once the initial design was put together, then actually working on different refinements to that particular design. Most recently, the City Council approved a conceptual plan for the park in July of 2017, so a little less than a year ago. Our comprehensive plan shows that this area is appropriate for a park or is designated as a park. This is some of the information that was included in your packet. This is one of the drawings showing the proposed Haymarket Plaza looking towards the southeast, essentially. What I'll do is just go over a couple aspects of the site plan as it relates to the overall development and the comprehensive plan, and then Mr. Solberg will actually discuss the specifics of the park itself. In terms of the location of this of the proposed park, it is within 800 feet of public parking. There are 2 ramps that are within 800 feet. One would be the North Barstow ramp located in this location here, and that's about 550 feet. And then the other ramp is the Farwell Street ramp located over in this area here, and that's about the same distance from the proposed plaza. The site, as part of the development, will be raised out of the floodplain, which currently most of that area is within the floodplain. This wall that would be constructed here basically would be the floodway wall. This area down here would be within the floodplain. There'd be a small area along the top of the wall here that would be within the floodplain. The rest would be removed out of that. The site plan, and that has been approved by the DNR. The site plan for the plaza includes several general activity areas. Includes a trail connection that would go along the riverfront here. The trail would connect with an existing trail that was constructed as part of the Haymarket Landing facility over here. That would extend around and then head to the south along the Chippewa River with a trail that will be constructed this summer. The proposal also provides access to the riverfront for fishermen with a stairway that would go down into this area down here. There also would be some trees that would be planted in this area that are not shown on this plan, and that's one of the requirements of the DNR. The plaza itself incorporates decorative stone, some various green spaces, some activity areas that Dave will talk about, as well as some benches that would be used in conjunction with the park itself, but also with the arts center here. The designs that he'll show you also include some opportunities for art, and that's what these different kind of squiggly pink lines are. Those are strictly conceptual in nature. The actual art selections would be made at a later date. More than likely would be approved by the Eau Claire Arts Council and possibly by the City Council also. Lighting for the area is there's 3 different levels of lighting that would be provided. Within the center portion of it would be bollards type lighting, similar to like what we see along State Street. That would be kind of an example of the lighting. Along the riverfront trail would be more of a shepherd style design lighting that we see along our riverfront areas. And then along from Haymarket Landing and then the Arts Center, there would be some building lighting that would provide some illumination for the plaza also. All of that lighting would be designed with shielded lighting, and it would be dark sky compliant types of lighting. Also, what Dave will refer to as the proposal will include the bridge that I referred to before. The connection to the bridge would come into the plaza at this location here. The bridge would be about 210 feet in length, a single span, across the Eau Claire River. The width of that bridge would be about 16 feet. So it would be basically for pedestrian and bicycle use, although it would be wide enough in design that some smaller utility vehicles could get across it also. The Parks and Waterways Commission reviewed the plan back at their January meeting. They recommended approval. They had a couple comments that were suggested. They felt that there should be a little better delineation of the trail that's going along the riverfront here, that's connecting the trail here and the trail here. They felt that the plans that they saw did not include bicycle parking, and they felt that that should be included so it wasn't more of an afterthought afterwards. So the plans that you see tonight actually have been revised since Parks and Waterways, and the bicycle parking has been added, and they're showing that over in this area here. And again, Dave will kind of show you that particular feature. They also had some questions regarding the design of the benches. The benches that they saw were primarily just flat slabs that people would sit on. They felt that there should probably be a little bit more variety of benches, with those providing some backrest for some of the people, particularly if they're being over kind of in the art center area. So again, the design that you have tonight shows some variety of benches too that would be provided within that plaza area. The North Barstow bid and then the South Barstow bid have also reviewed this, and they have recommended approval. Staff is recommending approval of the plaza design with the one condition that we do to provide a little bit better delineation of that trail that extends along the riverfront here. This would be going on to the City Council at their meeting on Monday. And with that, if you have any questions of me related to the items I've talked about, otherwise Dave will get into more of the specific park design.
Are there any questions for Pat? I don't see any at this point.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Ivory did an excellent job of introducing it. I'll just get into a little bit more detail on a few items and then try to show how it fits in our overall construction schedule for downtown with associated features, and then answer questions if you have any. As Pat had mentioned on here, we do have the bridge that comes across. One goal with the bridge was to have a through, almost an art walk type feel when you come from the bridge and you're accessing Eau Claire Street and Graham Avenue. This area is one area that we will be working with the possibly the sculpture tour, and we have been working with the Eau Claire Art Council for inclusions of locations for art features along here. Typically not the large pieces of art that would be, of scale that wouldn't fit in, but something that would be somewhat consistent with the scale that you see on the sculpture tour. This is an area of outdoor seating that would be a raised platform. We have some seating on some natural stone that is intended to look like the stone you would see in a river, a skipping stone type, but they would actually be seats. And then we also hope to work with artists for the blue that you see, being locally sourced outdoor cafe tables. So this could be...
Can you blow up the picture so we can see it a little bit in more detail?
I have some closer views as we proceed. But the blue that you see here would hopefully be something that would be identifiable to Eau Claire, along with the trees that are located in, we're calling it the bean, although we don't want to be too Chicago-like, but it's shaped a little bit like a bean on here. We're hoping this will be an outdoor gathering area where you can view the water feature that would be located adjacent to it. Sit, talk with friends, grab a lunch, view the confluence of the rivers, and just be kind of an outdoor relaxing space, like a community deck almost for the city. And then next to it we have a water feature that has multiple geysers, probably around a dozen geysers. The circle is the same diameter as a phoenix in Phoenix Park. And each of these geysers that would be in here, or spouts, would be independently operated, and then they would have different heights and different lights that would hopefully be able to be timed in conjunction with lights that will be on the exterior of the Pablo Center. in the area adjacent to that, we have just a flat lawn space with lighting that would also be able to be tied in with the Pablo Center. So as you see on the Phoenix Park Bridge, as light spills through the area, these grass features, the lights that would be in the grass, would be able to be played in conjunction with the lights that are on the outside of the theater. And these lights aren't, they're not casting lights where you'll be able to read by those. They're self-lighting, so that they glow, and in particular on the theater, so that they don't provide a lot of light. The color lights don't provide a light that you can read, but they show up and they give you something to look at. So they cut down on some of the comments that we had for light pollution for that. Ringing the green space here, and then in front of the Arts Center in these locations are proposed to be fire features. So, and I have pictures of those in the renderings lit, and they're in your packet also. It would be a linear fire feature that would be lit. We're not anticipating it would be lit all the time, but it would provide the fire feature to complement the water feature that we have both here and then with a natural resource. And then there would be more stone seating, and as Mr. Ivory had mentioned, as we're going from the theater, where we would have different function benches, some at a higher elevation. So if it were more comfortable for you, you could lean against it, and you wouldn't have to get to the full 90 with your hips and your knees. And then also some include a back to it. And then as you transition down towards the water, you have more natural seating surfaces that you would see in Phoenix Park that would tie in closer with the confluence of the rivers. And then the red squiggly things, we've been referring to those as veggie straws. What we're intending to do is work with the Arts Council and identify appropriate areas throughout the plaza, and whether these were an artist's attempt at having some kind of verticality in the plaza. Everything in the plaza, there's no trees to block the view from the buildings out to the water until you get along the bank, and the DNR has requested replant river birch and more native species to replace the cottonwoods, and there's some Siberian elm and silver maples that are down here. The vegetation along the shore that's between the ordinary high water mark and the water will remain, so there still will be some trees that are existing that will be along the shore. But in the plaza itself, it's very flat, so we wanted to have something that would give a little verticality to it. We wanted to have light in here, but we didn't want to have it too bright, and we didn't want it to be something that would block your view through the plaza for either septic concerns or just for an event if there were an outdoor event here. So whether they're these lighted veggie straws or swim noodles, or they could be a lit sculpture. We've been looking at having a regular sculpture that would be lit externally, or possibly cut and then lit from the inside. We want to have some light features throughout the plaza that during the nighttime, we will have our standard trail lighting along the wall here. They can be dimmed, and we would have some other interesting light that would be throughout the plaza that would make it an inviting place after hours in the wintertime. And just kind of create that special place for Eau Claire. I'll go through the views real quick, and then I'll answer questions if you have any. Here is what we're looking for, a view coming out of Eau Claire Street, the intersection of Eau Claire and Graham Avenue, the front door to the theater. You can see these, they're calling their pixie sticks there, and we have our veggie straws here. So it's a friendly competition, but we're trying to welcome people from the street into the plaza space, and you can see how it's open once you get inside. There's some minor landscaping along the building, with all of the features that we have in for electrical, gas, the fountain features, the existing transformers that are there. We're hiding a lot of our cabinets and supporting boxes along the edge of the plaza, in with the right-of-way, or in with the landscaping. So that's what you see here. The color of these stones are intended to either be a stone that would tie in with the theater, or it'll be a stamped and stained concrete, if budget is a concern, that would tie into the theater. But we're trying to draw people into the plaza at this point. When you're approaching from the other location, from the river, and you're heading north along the river, just entering the plaza, this is the view that you would have with the same rail that we have along the river in downtown. These are more of the seating surfaces that you would be familiar with along some of the trails in Eau Claire. These, again, would be some kind of an art feature that would be incorporated. You see a little bit of the water in the background, although we're not anticipating water probably that high. We're looking at probably more the 4 to 8 foot range. This looks like it's about 15 feet. Some of the bollard lighting that Mr. Ivory mentioned, that would provide just some soft glow lighting interior, but not as much as we have along the trail. And then as you approach the theater, some of the more contemporary, either a cut granite or a more polished, refined feel that would feel more elegant and more cosmopolitan with the theater. And then as you approach the river, you become a little bit more natural. This area is a slight amphitheater. It's about a 3-foot grade difference from the low point to the top, where the rest of the plaza is within about a foot of itself, with elevation to accommodate drainage. Out in front of the theater, this is just one example of a seating surface. Probably won't use this one, but we wanted to show what a polished stone could look like, possibly a higher elevation that you would lean against. Here's another variation that would be a lower without a back. And these are all comments that have been raised at open houses and then again at the Waterways and Parks Commission. And this is a stone seating surface that would have a stone back on it. So if you would like a back, that was a request to have some stone that ties in. The stone is the plaza is predominantly stone and masonry based with some green lawn areas. There isn't a lot of iron that's out in the plaza, so we had requests for the Dumore 58s, the benches that are donated throughout town, and they're quite frequent. They don't quite match the landscape architect's scheme for colors and fit and finish in it, so we're trying to replace that utility with a stone finish that would tie in. So this is the area out in front of the Confluence or the Pablo Center now. Shifting gears with a bridge that will come from Phoenix Park. It's 16 feet wide on the inside, a 16-foot walk path. The height of the arch is approximately 33 feet high at the middle. It'll be a black painted structure with a wood deck. It'll be tongue and groove, so if you're having tennis shoes on, flip-flops, heels, it will be a walking surface that'll be appropriate for people. And we try to line it up so as you're walking through, you're drawn to the front door of the theater, so it's very intuitive to people parking in the North Barstow ramp, going to the theater for an event, or just people using our trails. In the midspan, we have 2 5-foot by 15-foot lookouts, one looking towards the Barstow Street Bridge, one looking out towards the river, the confluence of the two. And these are 2-inch rods that support the truss that support approximately half of the deck, with the arches on top that are supporting the remaining. To be able to clear span the river, just a standard prefab truss bridge like you see in Boyd Park wouldn't be long enough, wouldn't be possible, so we're getting the assistance from the overhead arches. As you get closer to the plaza off to the side, we try to tuck in the bicycle parking. We have some in this location. Further ahead up by the transformers we have a location, and then over by where the bean, and we're anticipating there will be a good usage of people wanting to bike in, dismount, lock up their bikes, and then sit in this outdoor area. I think this is going to be just a fabulous place when it's all said and done and people are using the plaza. And then this is a little bit further in when you're halfway from the bridge to the front door. We have the front area, the walk, that could be part of the sculpture walk. Bike racks off to the left. We're looking at doing something with the transformers that we can get approved with Xcel Energy to try and either hide them in plain sight or minimize their appearance, whether it be a wrap or whether it be some kind of a treatment. Right now they're on site, they're green, but we're hoping to make them more of a feature that you wouldn't notice or would be an asset. Again, here's how that relates with the wall and landscaping. And we have the controls for the fountains, the lights, electrical are all tucked in the landscaping behind with the bike parking in front. And then a bird's eye view that shows close to the touchstone in Phoenix Park with where the bridge ties into Haymarket Landing. And then the overall view of the area, how it ties in with what we're planning for this year. Haymarket Plaza is here. The Riverwalk is the area you see in gray, and we're planning a trail connection that, if our budgets afford, will connect Lake Street with Haymarket Plaza, future lookouts to be designed at the ends of the streets, and then a tie into the new Grand Avenue pedestrian bridge. The design of this Riverwalk trail and these lookouts are anticipated to come back before Waterways and Parks and the Planning Commission and the City Council later this spring. We want to see how much the plaza is going to cost first, and then with our overall budget, we'll get the trail in, and then whatever amenities we can add to this, we'll add in. I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Peterson? Yep, now you are.
Okay. One of the first things I wrote down, a note to myself when I went through this this weekend, was bicycles through the plaza. And you mentioned someone else had brought that up too. You know, you're going to have relaxed pedestrians roaming around in this area, and you've got 3 different trails coming in here. The bridge, the one on the south side of the Eau Claire River to Barstow Street, and then down south on the Chippewa River. So
Yep.
I think a trail should be delineated through here.
When we started the plaza, there were talks about having a trail come up and go through it and try to provide access, or to try and have it off to the side. And ultimately, we tried to tuck it off to the area along the rail. The viewing for the river is hopefully accommodated with the benches here and in this location. The one issue that we're working with is when you're coming down, and it's fairly clearly designated along the Haymarket Landing building, you have landscape beds that keep the trail separate from where you would be sitting out there. When you get to this location and you get to this location, I can see moving forward that in the downtown, we are already having concerns with bicycles and where you should walk your wheels and where they would be appropriate. Coming this direction, we'll definitely have a different treatment for where the designated trail, the Riverwalk Trail, comes through here. So one thing that we were asked to look at was, is there a way to delineate and draw the bicycles through the plaza, not using a double yellow line like you would have in a normal place, but on a normal route, but some way to delineate that, whether it be signage or whether there would be a different paver, whether it could be lights that could be in that could provide a lit route for it, or even with our Shepherd Hook lights, we have the ability to, with different fixtures, I don't know if we could project something down. So we're trying to come up with something that would be subtle, that wouldn't draw away from the overall design of the plaza, but still give that wayfinding effect to keep the bicycles coming through here. The narrowest that we get is just a little under 20 feet at this location here. And then it bellies out when we come through the area that dips down, and then we're back at grade here. So we try to add a little extra space for people who would look at the railing and be gazing out over the water, as well as those sitting. But bicyclists are going to have to also regulate their behavior going through an area, because it won't be like the old Abe Trail or the Chippewa River Trail when you get through there. So that's something that we're struggling through right now. How do we do that in a tasteful manner that helps wayfind for that?
There definitely will be conflicts between the pedestrians in the plaza and the bicyclists just wanting to go through on the trails.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I noticed I think it was the second or third one, when we were on the northwest corner of the Art Center, when you were showing, it'd be your second or right there. There's trees there. Are there any other trees in the plaza?
These trees are actually shown on the Confluences, or the Pablo Center's property, and that's what we're working with. As far as in the plaza itself for other trees, we have river birch and native species will be planted along the wall here. And then there are trees in the bean that we're hoping, we're looking at quaking aspen, a sunburst locust or honey locust, something that would have a filtered sunshine that would come through, that wouldn't be massive, that would be unique in appearance. These areas here are grass areas, and this is yet to be determined whether they're ornamental or whether they come out. This is actually on the property of the Pablo Center. Along the Haymarket Landing building, those are more landscaping trees, shrubs. They wouldn't be very tall. So
I think without shade out there, if you have those stone benches, you aren't going to be able to sit on them till 9 o'clock at night, till after they cool off.
that's one thing.
It's going to be a real problem without shade.
One of the reasons we've had almost 24 meetings on this is, one option we had was like a European plaza that you would walk in and you would expect, pigeons to fly off with a fountain in the middle where it was all paved with nothing. And then we looked at another direction with the landscape architect that helped with Phoenix Park, and it looked like Phoenix Park with lots of trees and lots of green space. And then the brakes were put on that because it's too parky. And this is kind of the balance between the two. So it's a plaza, so it's a greener, softer plaza than you would have for a hard plaza in Europe, but it's a harder version of a park. So
just my thoughts. Everyone has their own ideas.
Yep. No, it's a very deliberate non-inclusion of trees in this area here.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Grandland.
I think that once you get to the point where you're bringing that trail in from the south along the Chippewa, you might want to consider something that prevents unintentional descent of the stairs on a bicycle. Whether it's seating, plantings, or colored lights or something, it might be a good idea not to have such a straight approach to a descending stair like that.
Sure.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. I don't actually have a question, but having attended 3,000 meetings about this, and including the very first placemaking, I don't know if you were in this job then, but
prior to my time here.
the idea was always that people wanted a gathering place. They didn't want a playground. They didn't want a park. They wanted a gathering place, and where people could, events could take place, but they wouldn't be permanent events, or where a food truck could pull up on the street and people could get food and sit and eat. So I think you've captured, in my opinion, what people wanted. Also, to be able to walk down and touch the water, that was a really important thing. And then the second thing I want to say is that in one of the many millions of downtown plans, we talked about the streets that go up to the Chippewa River, that you just talked about having lookouts there along the trail. And that was something that people thought was a great idea, that you could, again, not touch the water, but look at the water. So I'm glad to see that you've done that as well on the trails.
Is there any other comments? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I just want to say that I think it's an excellent, beautiful-looking plan. One of my questions that I do have has to do with public restrooms. It looks like if the bridge is in place, it's not too far to get to the restroom across the river. What if the bridge doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen right away? Where can a person at this park find a bathroom?
Well, there are no, we looked at trying to have restrooms in here. There aren't public restrooms, obviously, in it. So again, the closest public restrooms outside of, if you're a guest at the Lismore Hotel or dining there, would still be to come up along the trail that's completed, go across the bridge, and then come over to the Trailhead building there. Otherwise, we explored for possible a bookend on the bridge here, something that you could tuck a restroom in around it. And we just weren't able to get restrooms that would be worth the expense spent on it in here. We did take bids for the bridge, or it was advertised, and we're looking at presenting those to council for consideration at their next council meetings. So I do feel that this bridge will happen in conjunction with the plaza.
You're pretty confident.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. I guess I didn't know that.
It's not built yet, but I'm very confident that when these bids are awarded or presented to the council, that they'll be awarded.
Good, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have a couple.
Sure.
The bridge with the wooden surface, how do you propose to do snow and ice removal? Because I can't help but think that salt wouldn't be very good for that wooden surface.
We have a Toolcat. It's a smaller vehicle, and it would be preferred to have it with it broomed off or plowed off with a plastic blade. We wouldn't be plowing this with a pickup truck.
Okay. What would you do in the case of the ice like we've got today?
I mean, you could. This is a very durable outdoor wood. It wouldn't be my. I guess we would have to work through that. It wouldn't be my first choice to put salt on it, but if you had to, I don't know if we get into operationally wise, if it is icy, put some sand on it or restrict use of it until it's safe for that. Being wood, you get salt on it. If it's sealed correctly, if you're able to sweep it off and wash it off, it's not going to be disastrous. But I'd like to minimize the amount of salt on this as much as possible. The bridge will be painted it'll be a DOT paint coat system. Mm-hmm. And obviously the less salt we have on that, the longer the paint will last.
Right.
It's our hope that the paint will last as long as the decking should last for it.
On those overlooks that are on that bridge, you're going to put a bench on either side so people can sit and kind of enjoy it?
We don't have those included, but that may be an opportunity for those, the Do More donated benches.
I think that would be a great idea, as long as they're bolted down so people can't throw them in the river.
Yeah. They're quite heavy also, but the Grand Avenue Bridge that will start construction here in a month or so, at each of those piers, there's room for 2 benches on each side, so there's a total of 12 benches that can be accommodated on the overlooks there. So that would be something definitely that we could consider.
Okay. How much are you looking at having that fire feature going, just during performances, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
I like the fire feature.
Yeah, we haven't got into the operations on it. One thought is to have it just for special events or, right at dusk. Another one is to have it in conjunction with the Phoenix Park Bridge, where it's on in the morning, it's off during the day, and then it's on again at night. We'll have to work through that. I don't think it's going to be on all the time, like an eternal flame type feature. I think it will be on in select times. The same with the water feature that's in there as well. I don't believe that will be on all the time, but that will certainly be on more during the day, and then maybe it'll go off at 10 o'clock when the lights go off, unless there's something special. So operationally, we still have some procedures. If there's lights, who controls those? DECI is helping with the lights on the Phoenix Park Bridge as they help with the lights in the plaza. So those are all things we're trying to work together so everything in downtown is coordinated and works together. We're going to try to get it built first, and then we'll.
Okay. I hate the noodles. You have to come up with a better idea. I like the idea of some kind of vertical sculptures, but not noodles, please. And then the final question I had is, I can see that this plaza could become very popular for things like weddings. Is there a spot in there that people would be able to reserve to have a wedding ceremony, something like that?
Well, one of the, we didn't design the plaza specifically around events, but we wanted to design it so you could have events. So the total plaza itself is about the same area that was sanctioned for the Preclaire event. So there's room for about 1,500 people standing in the plaza if it's a similar event. We wanted to keep the trail separate, so if there was an event in the middle part here, that there would be the opportunity with like movie theater bollards where you have the rope that goes between. or some other way to delineate that. You could still keep the public trail open, but you could have a private event in here.
Okay.
Whether or not that's a policy that we enact, every park and public space has a different reservation and a different use for that.
Sure.
But at least it's designed to incorporate that if it would be.
Okay. I'm just thinking with the geysers and with the fire feature, that would be attractive to some people. And how do you anticipate this being used in the middle of the winter?
Well, one thing that we're going to include, and we're debating back and forth, either in the middle of here or in the green space here, we're going to have a water main buried on end, so you can slide a holiday tree in. It'll be plowed. The trails will be plowed. There's a possibility to put a membrane down here and have a small skating rink with a holiday tree here. I think it'll be used. I think if we make it nice enough, it's not going to be any warmer than anywhere else is this time of year, but I think if you can have interesting features, art features, and the trails are clear, and you have some place to sit, the fires aren't intended to be warming fires, so they won't draw people out, but I think there's something magical if it's snowing in the wintertime and you have the fire going at night. So I think it will be used, especially if 5-10 years down the road, we have more of a light theme along the river and downtown, like we've started with the Let It Glow in Phoenix Park, and then now we're here. We have the capability to, with donations, the Grand Avenue Bridge is being redecked with all of the conduits and infrastructure in it. So instead of spending 4 months like the Phoenix Park Bridge to get the conduits on the outside, if there's a donation, we would be able to install them. So I think as we include more features in downtown, I think people are going to want to come out and enjoy it, whether it's 0 or 80 out or 90.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Are there any other
busy.
questions? Commissioner Seymour.
One more question. As long as you keep bringing up the Grand Avenue Bridge, is it okay to talk about that for just 1 second?
1 second.
Will the new railings be shorter than the existing railings?
The new railings are going to be 54 inches high. So they'll be, we have 1.5 feet. 54 inches. They're 4.5 feet on there. So they'll be bicycle rated in height.
How does that compare to what's there now?
The existing railings are about pretty close to that, I'd say.
It seems like they're right at eye level, which when you're trying to look at the railroad bridge that's lit up, it's kind of, the high bridge has a lower railing, which is...
No, it'll be the same height as the high bridge. That's the pedestrian rated
so it is
height.
lower.
Yep. The bridge railing on the Grand Avenue will have 1.5 feet of concrete down below to allow us to widen it. And then the railing portion itself will be a little bit shorter, but it'll be the bicycle rated. Water Street is an example of that height, also the new Water Street Bridge. So it'll be higher than just a pedestrian rail.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we've exhausted our questions. Thank you for your patience in answering our questions.
Oh, thank you.
This is a public hearing. If there's anyone who'd like to speak to this issue. If there's anyone who'd like to speak to this issue. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any discussion? I'd call the question then. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 4, for recommendation, Hidden Meadows Phase 3.
Hidden Meadows Phase 3 is the property here, located off of Dreyer and Harless. You can see Phase 1 and 2 have all been completed, and many of the homes are under construction. The preliminary plat for the property showing the 5 lots that were approved. And now the final plat showing the 5 lots and the right-of-way dedicated for the street. The final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat. It dedicates Dryer Court as a street for access. That street is part in city jurisdiction and part in the town of Washington. An agreement will be needed approved by both for the construction of that street. We have recommended approval subject to that agreement being in place prior to signatures being placed on the plat.
Are there any questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Is the applicant here?
Hi there. Steve Wiggins. I live at 3560 Sharon Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Anything you'd like to add?
I know that agreement's getting close. That agreement involves the city, the county, and the township. So, but it's worked out. So I think we go to sometime first part of March, we go to the township, and then I think the end of the month it's at the county also.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? I don't see anything. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
We have 2 motions and a second. Any discussion? We'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item for our agenda is for recommendation, a final plat for Session Street Twin Homes.
This property is located at the corner of Sessions and London Road. And that's the preliminary plat approved for the property. It creates 6 lots for 3 twin homes. 2 of the twin homes are under construction on the site. Yep. And there's the final plat for the property, showing the 2 that are under construction. The final plat, again, is consistent with the approved preliminary plat. The recently approved joint cross-access and maintenance agreement, which we attached, will need to be filed with the city, reviewed, and recorded with this plat. And this is the first time we've done this. So the way it works is we've given this information to applicant. Their attorney is drafting that agreement. Once they have it done, they'll give it to our attorney. Once everybody's happy, we'll place signatures on the final plat, and they can go record both the documents. So we have recommended approval subject to that agreement being in place prior to us signing the final plat.
Any questions for Daryl?
Yes.
Oh, Commissioner Peterson.
You said showing the 2 buildings that are under construction?
Mm-hmm. They originally platted this as 3 lots for duplexes. They come in, then once the structures are there, make sure that the lot line runs right down the middle of that building. And then they file these agreements as part of the final plat for the property. The 3rd one will be up in here. I don't know if they've removed that existing home yet or not, but once that home's removed, then they'll build the 3rd twin home at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Thank you. Is the applicant here? You can come forward if you'd like to.
Good evening. I'm Pete with Real Land Surveying. I'm representing Wolverine Properties and Frank Lechner on this. Anybody have any questions for me?
Anyone have any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. If there's anyone who'd like to speak to this issue, if there's anyone who'd like to speak to this issue, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the final plat.
We have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda for recommendation, Crest Ridge, formerly Grover Road, to approve the final plat for Crest Ridge.
This property is located right here. next to Tiffany Lane on the south side of Grover Road. That's the preliminary plat for the property as approved by the Plan Commission. And there is the final plat. It is again consistent with the approved preliminary plat. It creates 15 lots for single-family development. One outlot, which will be a city drainage pond. CSM has been filed for the existing home on the property. They've labeled non-buildable 20% slope areas. And we've recommended approval.
Are there any questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Steve Wiggins, 3560 Sharon Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Anything you'd like to add?
Nope.
Any questions for the applicant? I don't see anything. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval.
We have a motion,
Second?
and we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, a site plan for a warehouse facility.
Everyday Land Surveying and Engineering is requesting a site plan approval. This is on the corner of Truex and Preston Road. The warehouse facility is approximately 9,800 square feet for a warehouse facility with a 7-stall parking lot. There is a narrative attached in your packet, along with building elevations and the site plan. The narrative for the project does note that this will be for 4 or 5 employees working at the facility. That's the reason why they're doing the parking lot. The facility will have a loading dock off of Truex Boulevard with 2 overhead doors and also another overhead door. And they're requesting a driveway to be 42 feet wide, and that does require Plan Commission approval because it's over 30 feet. The narrative does note in there that the recessed loading docks could utilize 2 trucks at the same time, and also if they have a delivery or if customers are coming in or employees, that's the reason for the 42-foot wide driveway. The landscape plan does note street trees, which are subject to city approval from the city forestry. A 4-stall bike rack needs to be added to the plan. A pedestrian link shall be added to the plan to Truex Boulevard. And also, they should note on there whether they're going to need a dumpster screening requirement or if it's going to be inside the building. Attached in the report is the engineering report. If the Plan Commission does approve this, we do have some conditions that need to be met. As noted before, pedestrian link to Truex Boulevard, a 4-stall bike rack, dumpster location, approval of engineering, engineering approval of the driveways, and if you do approve this, you are approving it with a 42-foot wide driveway on Truex Boulevard. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Ryan? I don't see any. Thank you. Is the applicant here? If you'd have anything you'd like to add, come on up. Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. This is a public hearing, but I only see the applicant here. So if there's anyone who'd like to speak, please come forward. If not, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move approval with staff recommendation and conditions.
Okay, we have a motion.
Including the widened driveway? I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, down to our last items for discussion and direction, any code compliance items? Any future agenda items? You're a quiet bunch now. Well, then I have a certificate of appreciation. Daryl, would you come forward, please? Right here. All right, so I will read this. Certificate of Appreciation. Whereas Daryl K. Tufty has worked for the City of Eau Claire since March 1st, 1985, initially as the Administrator of Planning and Development and now as the Director of the Department of Community Development since December 20th, 2006. And whereas he has been a strong advocate of comprehensive planning, site planning, city and riverfront beautification, and neighborhood revitalization, and whereas his professional knowledge and experience has been a cornerstone of the Planning Commission, and whereas his thoughtful and detailed review of development proposals has encouraged higher quality development for the community, now therefore the City Plan Commission of the City of Eau Claire hereby wishes to acknowledge its appreciation to Daryl Tufty for his contributions, his leadership, and service to the City of Eau Claire. We will miss you, but we congratulate you on your well-earned retirement. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
All right, and any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, I call us adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.